We're in the middle of on a series, just because it keeps getting bigger. I think it was only meant to be 3, and then God keeps dropping stuff. So far we've seen a bunch of stuff, but the essence is that everyone is to be valued, everyone is to be prized. I don't think the church is particularly good at that at times. I think someone once said that we're the only organisation on the planet that shoots our wounded. Which I can kind of understand. It's ridiculous that is a notion for us to understand, but it's one that we identify with in the past with churches. That cannot happen here. What we need to be is a place of grace, a place focused on his love at all times and all ways. And I was thinking about honor in terms of, what we need to get from this, because like we constantly do series, and it's got to be more than a concept. It has to fundamentally change us, and I'm not sure if we're that good at doing that. So I think time is of an essence, that we need to give time to God to soak this in. And I was thinking about breakthrough. There's a number of people here and in our church, including myself, and there's various aspects of breakthrough that we need. Right, so I'm not necessarily talking about this morning the nature of supernatural breakthrough. We're going to look at that particularly when me and Bridget talk to you about prayer and what we're discovering about that and the ways that might fundamentally change us and help us. But the more I think about breakthrough, the more I came back to honor. Because actually, breakthrough happens through relationship. God has designed this world, this planet, to be a relationship with him, relationship with each other. If we look at the greatest commandments, it's essentially that anyway. Love God with all your heart and love your neighbor as yourself, correct? So fundamentally, we are told constantly that this is a relational concept. And so I think honor is way more important than we give it credence for in the past. And so what I want to do is I want to suggest that the more that you read the scriptures, the more that you will see, one of the ways to get breakthrough is displaying honor. It does something on a supernatural level that seems natural at the time but creates something. So honor brings breakthrough. I believe that honor flowing from you will bring honor flowing to you. It's a simple concept. You could argue it's a selfish concept, but it's not, because honor is always the right thing to do. And I believe this because of the scriptures. I believe honor is always the right thing to do, but I also now believe that honor brings breakthrough to you. So it's not just the right thing to do. There's something powerful about this principle. And I believe it because the scriptures teach it again and again and again and again. But I've also seen this in my life. And I've seen this in many of your lives, that when you give honor to something, eventually, maybe not straight away, it brings you breakthrough. And on the flip side, when you dishonor, or when I've dishonored in the past, actually, it doesn't bring me breakthrough, it brings me defeat. Makes things worse, actually, pretty much every single time. And I think that's because this concept of relational connection, maybe we haven't got quite right in terms of honor. If you are joining us for the first time in this series, you may not know that actually we live in one of the most shame-based, dishonorable cultures on the planet. In the UK, we are terrible. We love to build people up when it serves us, and we love even more to pull them down when it serves us. We looked to the likes of Tiger Woods, didn't we, and David Beckham and Meghan Markle. We lifted them up, and then we enjoyed watching them fall. Bit weird, really, isn't it, when you put it that way? But that's what happened. So to help us this morning get this concept, I want to look at 2 kings, and we've looked at this story. If you've been here for a while, we've looked at this story a few times. But it's one I keep coming back to because I just think it's loaded with goodness for us. And we're going to join the story with King Saul, who's on the throne. And Saul's, I'm going to say, I think he's a pretty cool guy. I mean, it went wrong on a number of levels, but this guy was special. This guy was anointed. We read this of him in 1 Samuel 9:2, that he was an impressive young man without equal among the Israelites. So I'm not being funny, that's quite a big crowd, and a head taller than any of the others. When he says that, it doesn't literally mean that he was a head taller than the others. That would be a bit weird. That puts him in the giant territory, which we know back then was bad. No, we're talking, this is kind of a, wow. Like when you looked at him, he's upstanding in his field. Think Scarecrow. He is incredible. He's amazing and impressive. And so he's selected, for whatever reason that God knows, as the king, the human king of Israel. Obviously, God didn't want us to have a king in Israel, but he's the true king, but he gives honor to the people, because that's what he does all the time. And we see actually he does a pretty good job. If you start looking at what Saul does, he implements some cracking policies that we can kind of understand. And he's really successful in military warfare, which was very important back then. He's successful in the battle, particularly against the Ammonites. So he's doing really, really well. But there's a fundamental flaw in Saul from day one, which is why I feel sorry for him in a way, and how things transpired for him, and the scriptures, me and Joel will unpack how to navigate the scriptures in due course. But a part of that makes me feel sad for him, because he was an incredibly insecure person. From day one, when he's about to be anointed and appointed king, he's hiding in the baggage. Like, he doesn't want it. Like, he's like, why on earth am I being selected for this? I am not worthy. I am not good enough. I think we've all kind of had that feeling, right? And so you can identify it. Kind of, I feel like he didn't really have a choice. So it's an interesting summary there. But essentially what happens is, over time, Saul gets overwhelmed. I'm being gracious to him. He gets overwhelmed. He makes some terrible decisions time and time again, to the point that actually near the end of his days, he makes this decision that none of us could possibly fathom, that he ends up going to a witch and seeking demonic knowledge from her about what's going to take place and where he's at. So you go from someone who's close to God to doing literally the other way, right to the other side. It's an extraordinary journey for us to kind of learn from and think, wow, that is bizarre. And so eventually, during this phase of Saul's life, the prophet Samuel, who anointed him as king in the first place, kind of comes to him, and it's an awkward conversation, you can imagine. I'm not sure how awkward Samuel would have found it. I think he was quite ruthless in a beautiful way. And he goes to Saul, and he essentially says, you're going to no longer be king at some point. Like, what you've done, you're just ignoring God. You're kind of putting this in your own hands. You're taking advantage of everything God's given you. You're not really doing what he's asking you to say. So you're going to step aside, and God is going to bring a new king in place. So you can imagine, if you're insecure anyway, that's not great. That's going to get your heckles up. That's going to frustrate you. You're going to be freaking out. Who is it? What's going on? All this kind of jazz is going through your head. And so we now join our story as the prophet Samuel anoints basically a teenage boy whose job for the family is looking after sheep. There's a guy called David, who I'm sure most of you will have come across. And David is a bizarre character. I love David. There's so much of David I identify with. And it just encourages me. But he starts his journey as an honorable fellow straight away. So we kind of meet him. One of the second aspects that we meet him is his brothers are in battle, and his dad kind of sends him off, said, would you go and feed them? Would you give them water? Would you check on them? Would you just make sure they're okay for me? So David does what he's told. Honorable guy, honorable kid, goes, checks on his brothers, gives them bread or whatever, however you want to picture that. And then he spots that the Israelites are in a spot of bother, right? And he hears this giant Goliath. I'm sure you've heard of David and Goliath. He hears Goliath just slamming Yahweh, God. And there's something in David inherently about that really knocks him. And he thinks, look, I know God. I worship God. I pray to him. I play to him. I look after sheep for him, because every job is important, right? And we do everything we do for him. And he's like, I'm not having this. Why is no one taking him on? And they're pretty much like, well, yeah, go for it, mate, because none of us want to take on that big giant, you nutter. And so he does. And what's amazing is he wins. He basically delivers Israel. They defeat the Philistines. It's quite an extraordinary story. So straight away, he's kind of this honorable person, which, if you're King Saul and you're insecure and you already know that maybe your time is coming to an end at some point, that's not great, is it? Can you feel the chain reaction beginning to take notice? Because a little nasty rumor around this time starts doing the rounds. And that is that actually the person who's about to take your place at some point is very much David. So you're like, Now, there's a problem with that, because common status in that world, and it's still the case now, isn't it, is that the king's son becomes king. right? And he's got a firstborn son, and it's Jonathan. So Jonathan has been prepped since the day of his birth. He's going to take over. He's going to be Saul's heir. He's going to be the king of Israel, right? So it shouldn't flip and be David, right? What about my legacy? What about what I'm leaving? This is not okay. Legacy is important, especially back then. And so you can see that he starts getting rolled. And so what he does is he thinks, right, I need to kill David, because that's what you do, right? When you've got an enemy. Don't know if you know that. It's biblical. No, do not hear what I've not just said. That would be bad. Very, very bad. Please don't do that. We love you. Be nice to people all the time. Just thought I better. There's a few new people, so I thought I'd better just put that out. And so Saul thinks, okay, got a plan. I'm going to send him out to battle time and time again, and eventually he's going to die in battle. So it's like a technical foul. You know, you're one-on-one with the goalie, then maybe you've got some cover and you take a booking for your team. He's thinking, well, my hands won't really technically be with blood because we need to battle anyway, so I'll make sure David's right at the front. The problem is it backfires because David, annoyingly, is amazing. Right? He does exceptionally well. He's incredibly successful to the point that he becomes dearly beloved in Israel, to the point that they sing a song about him, which makes matters even worse for Saul. The song went a little bit like this. I'm not going to sing it to you. You'll be very glad to know. 1 Samuel 29:5. Isn't this the David they sang about in their dances? Saul has slain his thousands and David his tens of thousands. Now, if you're Saul, you're thinking, are you kidding me right now? So it's almost like when you're a football team, you buy a jersey, you've got your best player, and then someone else comes who's better than you, and everyone starts buying their shirt and not yours. It's almost like, well, yeah, King Saul's cool, but David's amazing. He's brilliant. I wanted to be like Saul, but now I want to be like David. Like David's way better. Even though Saul's good, David is where it's at. So if you're King Saul, that's going to hurt. That's going to smart. That's, again, going to send you off. And so what happens is, so ensues a kind of 7-year, I suppose, hunt for David's life. Cat and mouse game, life and death. Saul has already thrown a few spears at David while David's been playing the guitar to try and calm him down. And he knows that if you're a musician, if Jess is still in the room, you know that if you get spears thrown at you, it's probably time to get a new gig, right? It's not a good look. It's not something you want. So David knows, and he starts running away, and amazingly, his band of mighty men follow him, which is very exciting. Social outcasts join him. There's a lot to that we could explore, and I'd love to at some point. But Saul's hunting him down with a professional army, right? The Israelite army. And so a few years into this journey, David is given the opportunity of a lifetime. Just imagine you've been stripped away from your home. You're living kind of as a nomad. There's no real base that you've got, maybe 1 or 2 strongholds that you kind of fortify. And it's a day that his men have been praying for years and years. 1 Samuel 24, 1-3, and it's arguably one of the funniest stories and amazing stories in Scripture. After Saul returned from pursuing the Philistines, he was told David is in the desert of En-Gedi. So Saul took 3,000, so not many, just 3,000. This is David we're talking about. 3,000 chosen men from all Israel and set out to look for David and his men near the crags of the wild goats. Isn't that great? J.R. Tolkien could have come up with a better name, I think, but there we go. We'll go with the crags of the wild goats. He came to the sheep pens along the way. It's very glamorous. A cave was there, and Saul went in to relieve himself. David and his men were far back in the cave. I love this. What are the flipping chances, right? Like you're trying to hunt your enemy. You need to, do your business. And so you go in a cave away from everybody. And what takes place at this moment is, you don't know it, but David can see everything. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm quite a private person. I lock the door if I'm using the facilities, especially if you have young children. That's very important, just to give you the heads up. They still know how to pick the lock. Now, Saul's so insecure that he's going to lose his throne to David that he makes a mistake that all of us do. In trying to take the situation into his own hands, he puts himself directly into David's hands. By dishonoring David, he's put him in a position of defeat. Dishonor, I'm telling you now, always, eventually, maybe not immediately, leads to defeat. Let's read verse a bit longer. This is the day the Lord spoke of when he said to you, I will give your enemy into your hands for you to deal with as you wish. I mean, David's men are absolutely elated. Can you imagine this moment? It's essentially a no-brainer. This is the guy that's hunting you. It's time to kill him. It's basically self-defense anyway. It's kill or be killed, right? Now, I'm sure we've gone through that scenario with somebody in our heads. What happens if you're, as a Christian, what do we do? Someone's going to try and kill us, and are we allowed to fight back or whatever? And I would say yes. But I'm not God, so what do I know? But in this moment, it's kill or be killed. You're the next king. He's the current king. Don't tell me that God hasn't ordained this very moment for the change to take place. It's a no-brainer. Kill him. Then David crept up, unnoticed, and cut off corner of Saul's robe. What's he on about? I could have sworn that was going to say, at least his head. Now, I know what you've been thinking, so let's just get it out in the open because I'm the same. I assume we're all the same here. You've been wondering if this was a number 1 or a number 2. Clearly, here in this moment, it's a number 2. Right? You don't creep up on someone that easily when it's a number 1. If it's a number 2, it takes a little bit of time sometimes. And if you've got men in your life or had men in your life, that they spend an awful amount of time in there, and it's quite bizarre. So it's a number 2. I thought I'd get that spiritual point out there, just adds context. And we'll carry on. He said to his men, the Lord forbid that I should do such a thing to my master, the Lord's anointed, or lift my hand against him, for he is the anointed of the Lord. That is an extraordinary, not just statement, but honorable heart that his mighty men did not get. Put yourselves in David's mighty men's position right now. If David becomes king and he cuts off Saul's head, everything ends. You go back to your family, you stop running, you stop hiding. You go back to your own property, whatever. Life can start again. You get freedom back. So you want David to do this. This is justice, okay? And bear in mind, this is the Old Testament. This would be nothing in the scheme of things, right? This, compared to what we've read and what we will read in the future, it's nothing. So you can imagine that they are not happy about this. And to make matters worse, he's moaning about cutting off a tiny piece of Saul's robe. David, kill him, you dirtbag. We've done everything for you. The heck are you playing at? We've given up everything, and you're not even worried about us. You're worried about you cut a little bit of his robe off. Like, just imagine the emotion that is going through, because this is real, right? It's not just a story. There's massive emotion. But I think amongst that emotion and all that advice, which was kill him, David realized something that he'd always carried, regardless of the fact that his enemy was in his grasp, regardless of what looked like, let's be honest, a certain God thing. David realized dishonor is never right. That not only is Saul the king, he's the king that God put in place, and he's the king that God will remove in his time, in his place, and that Saul is to be valued, is to be honored because he's made in the image of God. Killing him would be dishonorable, and dishonor is never right. At times, we might not like our boss. We might not like our brother, our sister. We might not like our partner. Heck, at times, maybe you don't even like me, even though I'm so lovely. But honor's always right. Always right. Prizing others above yourself is always the right thing to do. It's not the easy thing to do. It's always the right thing to do. And it's important here, and we'll qualify this in a bit. It doesn't mean no boundaries. It doesn't mean abuse is to be ignored. Actually, quite the opposite, as we'll see in this series. You see, David, after years of being hunted, harassed, in his opportunity to end it all, he chooses honor. I mean, if we think about this, in the short term, how many times do we make a mistake based on the opportunity that presents itself, and we make a decision that in hindsight and foresight, when we look back especially, we just wouldn't have made? If we'd have weighed it, we'd have handled things differently. I don't think that's just me. You look back, you think, actually, I wish I'd just done that, and I maybe overreacted, and probably got overheated at the moment, and probably shouldn't have made that decision or done that or whatever. Obviously just me. Great. You bunch of sinner liars. You can repent later. And I'm thinking, well, what is the good that's going to come from David killing him? How wise is it to kill the current king while he's doing a number 2? I mean, really, this is a culture that makes songs about those kind of things, right? So what does he want to be remembered as? Does he want to be remembered as a great warrior poet, king? Or does he want to be remembered as the king that assumed the throne because he killed the previous incumbent while he was doing a dump? I mean, it's not a big scale there. You know what is the right thing to do. How does he ultimately want to be remembered? Verse 7 to 8. Then David went out of the cave. And Saul left the cave and went his way. Then David went out of the cave and called out. So, this is weird already. He's going to get killed. He's not only had the opportunity to kill Saul and not taken it, and now we're in this moment that he's following Saul out of the cave and he's going to announce himself. He says, "My lord the king." So his men are really annoyed now if they weren't before. He's like, great, you had the opportunity to kill him and now we're going to die. There's 3,000 men and Saul who wants to kill us all. He's been chasing us for 3 years and you're just going to present yourself. And it gets worse. It really does. My lord the king, when Saul looked behind him, David bowed down and prostrated himself with his face to the ground. Now, I don't know if you've watched any jiu-jitsu, karate and everything. When you bow, you stay facing because you don't want to get kicked in the face by doing this. David is on the ground. Like he's basically like a little puppy, fully trusting you, ready for tickles. And his men, you just imagine what they're peeking around the cave, because I wouldn't have come out, I'm going to be honest. David's on his own at this point. Sod that. I'm not coming in. He's made his mess. They might not know we're in it. Now, maybe David won't let us. So I'm peeking around just to see what's going on in this moment. The implication of David doing this does not go unnoticed. It's huge. Saul and Saul's entire army know that purely in this moment that Saul should be dead. David presenting himself is essentially him saying, look, you're in the palm of my hands and I let you live. What happens when honor happens is breakthrough happens. This is remarkable what is about to take place. 1 Samuel 24, 9 to 10. He said to Saul, why do you listen when men say David is bent on harming you? In other words, people lie. This day you have seen with your own eyes how the Lord delivered you into my hands in the cave. Some urged me to kill you, and some of them, you can imagine in the cave like, yes, we did, because this is terrible. What's going to happen? But I spared you. I said, I will not lift my hand against my master because he is the Lord's anointed. Skip a bit, 11 to 15. See, my father, look at this piece of your robe in my hand. I cut off the corner of your robe, but did not kill you. So it's proof. That's important. Now understand and recognize that I am not guilty of wrongdoing or rebellion. I have not wronged you, but you are hunting me down to take my life. May the Lord judge between you and me. May the Lord avenge the wrongs you have done to me, but my hand will not touch you. As the old saying goes, from evildoers come evil deeds, so my hand will not touch you. In other words, I'm not evil, but you might be. Ouch. Against whom has the king of Israel come out? Whom are you pursuing? He's basically saying, I'm nothing. I've got nothing left. I've been on the run for 3 years. Look at me. I can't imagine they've eaten particularly well. This isn't a mighty Dave. This is probably quite a disheveled, a dead dog, a flea. May the Lord be our judge and decide between us. May he consider my cause and uphold it. May he vindicate me by delivering me from your hand. In other words, Saul, you deserve to die for what you've done to me. You don't deserve to be king, but that's God's job, not mine. Wow. And it's important to note here, because this is important, especially when Christians we mess this theology up. It's important to note here that honoring doesn't mean you get walked over. It's important to note that when there's injustice, it's okay calling it out. And here in this moment, he's saying, you know what, there's injustice here, you're wrong. My honor is I'm not going to kill you when I have the opportunity to. I'm not going to take this in my own hands. I'm going to leave this in God's. But I tell you one thing for sure. What you've done to me is disgraceful. That's important. So he calls out the abuse. Just imagine the intensity of this moment. David has behaved more like the king than the king. Everyone can see this. All of Israel will be told what happened this day. David is thinking beyond the moment. He's thinking what is about to take place over the next several years. This story will be told by Mike Dibbons in 2025. I mean, think. I'm not the only person speaking on this very chapter this morning around the world. I'm convinced someone else will be doing it. See, honor from David brought honor to David. Honor always brings breakthrough. Always. There's times in your life when things do get tricky and they get difficult and they get dark and you feel powerless, and sometimes it's painful. But there's something so critical to our destiny in moments like this. When we honor God and we honor the people around us, breakthrough happens. It may not happen straight away. It may not happen today, may not happen tomorrow, next week, next month, next year. Hopefully this decade, breakthrough happens. See, with David's story, he goes through all this again probably about 3 years later. He approaches Saul's tent while he's asleep. He takes a couple of items. I think it's his spear he takes out. And he walks out of the camp. I mean, just the guts of the guy. With Abishai, I think it is. The guy who always wants to kill people for David. That's a good person to have by your side. And he stands kind of like on this little hill and he shouts out to all Israel again, got your spear. It's right next to your bed. Didn't kill you again. Can you stop hunting me? So he does the same thing again. Ultimately, it takes 7 years after this event we've looked at before he's king of Judah. And then after that, it's another 7.5 years before he's king of all Israel. That's 14.5 years. But honor from David brought breakthrough to David. And honor from you will bring breakthrough to you every time. When you honor God, it's always the right thing to do. When you honor people, it's always the right thing to do. So we end gossip. It stops with us. If there's an oppressive situation at work, or there's an injustice at work, or there's discrimination at work, no, you don't be silent. Don't just sit there and ignore it. Don't have a little conversation, try and, not stir the pot. No, it's your job to bring a peacekeeper, as we saw last week. It's your job in the kingdom to challenge oppressive systems and injustice when things aren't right. Not in a dishonorable way, not in a way that makes people feel belittled, but in a way that just changes the whole narrative of the room. That you yourself are an ecosystem of honor, and you bring honor, and that, tell you what, that will bring you breakthrough. If you've not had a promotion and you think you earned one, I tell you what, just have a look. I'm not saying this is verbatim at all, but just look at honor. Have you been honorable? Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but God is always watching and he always knows, and there's something he can do supernaturally with honor that he can't do with anything else, because this is about relationships. I don't know what breakthrough you need today, tomorrow, next week. But I do know this, and I'll say it again. Honor from you will bring breakthrough to you. I've seen it so often. Maybe not immediately, but certainly eventually. And And if we can become a church like that, if you can become an individual like that, as you build your plexus, as you reach those who are leaning forward to whose you are and who you carry at all times, I promise you honor will be a tremendous key to displaying the love of God. Honor is not practiced in this country particularly. So when times are easy and peaceful, actually it's still a little awkward to do honor, but it's easier than when adversity strikes, as we've seen the last few weeks. Everyone is watching in that moment, just like David. Your story will be told. Just choose honor. That is a church I want to be part of.